Chapter 12 of The Coming People. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Coming People by Charles F. Dole. Chapter 12. The Happy Life. The hope of the ideal, or happy commonwealth, as we have already seen, is inseparably bound up with our faith in the divine universe, that is, with our faith in God. But the happy commonwealth can have no reality apart from the individuals who make it up. The problem is, how to secure the largest possible life for individuals. Perfect the individual, and society and the state will soon be organized aright. I wish to sum up all that I have said about better social conditions into the simplest terms of religion. I wish to show that the coming people who will work out the ideal democracy and the happy society must be essentially religious. The happy life for each will be the religious life. It grows out of the actual experience of religion. It does not depend upon the immediate and successful realization of all our dreams and visions. As the crystal may assume perfect form and beauty before the whole mass has yet become crystalline, so the individual may take his own orderly place in the divine universe, without waiting till all his fellows shall be ready to do the same. It is, indeed, by the orderly movement of individuals in obedience to ideal laws that all human society will at last be effectually brought into structural order. The happy life, whenever seen, wins others to adopt it. Everyone has observed certain persons whose religion gives them almost uniform happiness and serenity. Such persons belong to no single denomination. They may hold different creeds. Some of their opinions may seem to us strange or irrational. Evidently their satisfaction does not depend upon the peculiar dogmas that separate men from one another. On the contrary, beneath all peculiarities, the happy life, wherever we see it, rests upon the ancient and universal foundations of religion. There is no possible monopoly of the great facts and thoughts of the world. Genuine Methodists, earnest Roman Catholics, friendly Quakers, honest Unitarians, Christian Scientists, and Salvationists, so far as their religion makes them happy, are at one. If I may use an old pietistic phrase, they have all experienced religion. We are accustomed to say that we believe in God. Few really doubt his existence. But thoroughgoing and consistent belief in God is much less common than many suppose. The experience of religion is still rather rare in the world. There are two stages in any kind of belief. The first stage is where we merely hear it. Having no grounds for disbelief, we accept a great many things on the testimony of others. We are asked, for instance, do you know anything about Westminster Abbey? And we all say, yes, certainly. But our knowledge does not give satisfaction. It may even go with some sort of discontent, or a vague longing to know more. But suppose we have actually stood in that massive historic shrine, the resting place of the mighty dead, the statesmen, the poets, the heroes. We have listened at one of the great musical services when the rich associations of the centuries of English history have swept over our souls. As we have looked down the long beautiful aisles and have lifted our eyes to the great vaulted roof, a tide of feeling approaching ecstasy has possessed us. Then let us come home and let someone ask us, do you know anything about Westminster Abbey? And we say, we have been there. So with the great matters of religion, and especially with the thought of God. We begin in childhood with hardly more than the name of God. Besides a sort of dim awe, the name at first carries no feeling with it, much less satisfaction and delight. But let us rise some day to that higher stage of comprehension and realization, when we see what it means to say God. And what does it mean? It means not only our thought of beauty, wisdom, order, and unity in the world, but also a sense of prevailing goodness, of an infinite beneficence at the heart of the universe, of a real care and love over us, in us, sustaining us, as real as the air and the sunshine, more subtle than air and light. One may have slowly grown to this thought of the eternal goodness, like the good James Freeman Clarke, without ever a doubt. It may come to the skeptic even from his doubts. As a boy, reared in some lovely village among the hills, who leaves his home to wander around the world, only finds out how lovely it is after he returns to it a gray-haired man, so men often wander long in a wilderness of aimless thought, before they find out how beautiful and satisfying is the way of religion. To the man of skeptical mind, two terrible possibilities are open, like ways that lead to death. Through one way, as he looks, the forms of evil, of tempestuous, destroying powers, seem to possess the world. This is the view of an evil universe. It is what we call pessimism. Through the second way of doubt, one sees only the face of the Sphinx, the infinite mystery. This is the way of agnosticism. The skeptical mind tries both of these ways. It examines whether they are true. Do the facts of life urge one in either of these ways? Can one follow them consistently and live? The more thoroughly they are studied, the more hopelessly paralyzed they both leave the mind. They do not satisfy the intellect. They starve the affections. They baffle the moral sense. The mind, weary and listless, turns back to the solemn and gladsome way of religion. Let this appear at first a mere possibility, a grand perhaps. Nevertheless, the thought of infinite goodness at the heart of the world comes like the quiet shining of the stars after the tempest. It fits heart and thought, it fits the whole nature of man. It satisfies as only reality can satisfy. Sunshine falls on the world as often as we turn toward the majestic thought of God. This means that fear and anxiety are taken away from us. The divine life sustains us, and we are akin to it. Real care, real sympathy, pity, and love are over us. Once grant that beneficence is the sovereign power, and in all the great universe there is nothing really to fear for ourselves or for those we love. As Paul said, if God be for us, who can be against us? It does not make much difference through what form of faith we come to the realization of God. The one important thing is that we catch the idea, that it becomes more and more real. It has doubtless come through the forms and ceremonies of the Roman Catholic Church. It came with great purity and significance to the Methodist Wesley. It came to the old Hebrew psalmist with the wonderful words, "The Lord is my shepherd, and I will lift up mine eyes unto the hills." It came with power and persuasiveness to the great clear intellect of Theodore Parker. It ever carries with it joy and rest. It gives harmony and satisfaction. That faith is the best which brings the thought of God most simply and freest of all the tangle of doctrine and controversy. Blessed forever are those to whom this experience has come. We go further than this. As travelers coming into an unknown harbor, on taking the pilot aboard, at once feel confidence, without having as yet the slightest idea, as they look at the reefs and ledges barring their passage, how the pilot will conduct their ship into port, so men often catch a happy sense of the beneficent power over them, without any definite idea of the divine and rational universe to which they belong. The thought of God, like the presence of the pilot, meets an instinct of faith, but it needs to be supplemented and filled out with intelligence. Let me illustrate a second great thought of religion that goes naturally with the thought of God, and especially appeals to and meets the reason. We can imagine a stranger looking on a few years ago when the workmen were beginning the Congressional Library in Washington. They were laying the foundations. The ground was covered with the earth from the excavation. One would have been sure that some great public work was going on, but no one would have taken much pleasure or satisfaction in it. On the contrary, one might have been impressed with the noise and confusion in the midst of which the work went on. Let someone now invite the stranger to come into the architect's office and see the plans. He is shown the drawings embodying the beautiful thought of the architect. He sees the ground plan and the different elevations. He sees in pictured form how the front is to look, and the grand portal, and the splendidly decorated stairways and halls. He is made to understand the ideal meaning of the work. Through all the present chaos and noise he already contemplates the completed building. He has become a sharer in the architect's thought. So God permits his children to view the great universe plan. We are actually beginning to see, if we choose, as men never could see before, how this majestic work fits together. We are accustomed already to the thought of the lines and curves, the numbers and the proportions, whereby the visible world is made to be the expression of a vast system of ideas. We know how the particles of matter, like the frost crystals on the window pane, group themselves together after exquisite patterns. We have been told how plants grow and put forth their leaves in mathematical relations. We are not well accustomed as yet to the thought that similar wonderful lines of order go through the social, moral, and political life of man, binding history together into a universe plan and building human society into a sublime temple of God. The old lawgivers, long ago tracing out those words which we call the Ten Commandments, caught a view of the divine architect's plan. They saw the moral lines and proportions according to which human society is built. The great Hebrew teachers who discern that all kinds of injustice and cruelty are everlastingly doomed, that only such work lasts as is built on righteousness and humanity. These men looked on the architect's plan. The great teacher who grouped the Beatitudes together, teaching for all time that mercy, justice, purity, truth, and love rule the world, saw, as God sees, the marvelous plan. The forefathers who built our institutions and gave their lives for laws and principles, our modern prophets also, who saw that slavery could not endure in God's world while freedom is eternal. These men entered into the architect's plan. They saw what the thought of God is. The men today, in ever larger numbers, who are dreaming dreams of a better social condition, who foresee the time when men shall treat each other as brothers, these men see the architect's great work, his portals, his stairways, his beautiful halls, and the coming temple of humanity. God invites his children to the sight of the plan of his world. No soul ever looks on the magnificent lines and proportions of the ideal temple without a sense of joy and satisfaction. Our minds as well as our hearts are made to answer to this comprehensive plan of God. Our minds and hearts are made forever to be discontented with anything that comes short of this universe plan. Let anyone try for himself and find out the solid intellectual delight, the sense of unity, the restfulness, the enthusiasm also, with which God's universe possesses us, so often as we contemplate the beautiful lines of truth, justice, mercy, pity, peace, and love on which he forever builds. Let us go further than this. We may suppose that it is not a stranger who invites us into the architect's office. It is the great architect himself. He is our Father. We will suppose that he not only shows us the wonderful plans, but he has a distinct proposition to offer. He says, I want you to leave your private business, whatever it may be, and come into my employ. I will direct you what to do. I will make you a sharer and co-worker in this majestic building. It may be that before we were unemployed, or we were doing cheap, inferior, insignificant work, we were building on foundations that would surely be swept away. Henceforth we shall build on the everlasting foundations, where no honest labor can ever be wasted. Yes, some say, we see how this may be with the lawgivers and legislators, the men who built our institutions and liberties, the great masters, the prophets, the teachers, and the poets. We do not see so easily how God takes all men into his employ. But our gospel is for all, or it is no gospel. Here, for instance, is the tired wife and mother, the housekeeper, to whom work often seems drudgery and routine. The great architect says to her, come and work with me, build on the lines of my beautiful temple. And this true wife and mother, the housekeeper, building on the lines of truthfulness, of justice, of tenderness, of sympathy, is building after God's eternal designs. It may be that she has only to carve a single stone that few will see, but if she carves by the exquisite pattern, if she fashions a real home, if she shapes a noble character in her boy or girl, do you not see that such stones go into their places in the everlasting shrine? God says the same to the teacher. The happy teacher builds not for himself. He is not called to work for pay or promotion. He is under divine orders as truly as the men in old times who heard the splendid words, thus saith the Lord. The ideal things are indeed the words of God. The happy teacher builds on the lines of truthfulness, fidelity, earnestness, justice, accuracy, God's everlasting foundations. He is a co-worker and sharer with God. The great architect says the same thing to the man of affairs, to the merchant, or the manufacturer. The man seems sometimes to be struggling in merciless competition with his rivals. If this is so, and the work is built on no structural lines, then indeed is the man wretched. His mean and despicable actions, like wood, hay, straw, and stubble, disappear before God's test of fire. But let the merchant be working as Peter Cooper worked, as large-hearted men whom we know are working today, on the everlasting lines of equity, of kindliness, of truth, of reality, of beneficence, and his work endures. Human society is nobler forever because he has lived. To the happy service of a sharer and co-worker with God, the master builder calls every one of our youth as they come forth from our schools and colleges. They have the glorious opportunity of living the divine life here and now. They are offered the citizenship, not of America merely, but of the universe. No one of them needs to be a failure. For their largest possible product in fidelity and devotion and sterling good temper, the world makes incessant demand. For the men of the order of Sir Philip Sidney and Charles L. Brace, for the women of the spirit of Dorothy Dix and Florence Nightingale, in high stations and in humble places alike, the world calls for volunteers by the thousand. However old we may be in years, life lies not behind, but before us. None of us has more than begun to realize what the great truths of religion will do for us. To believe in God, and to trust that this is his world, to catch the divine plans for the ideal character, for the true home, for the noble friendship, for the honest trade or business, for the genuine church, for the beautiful commonwealth, for nations living together in peace, is to lead the happy life. To see God's ideals is to seek God. To live in the presence of the ideal things is to live in the presence of God. To lead the happy life is more than to believe in God, or to contemplate his shining ideals. Much more important and practical, the happy life consists in acting so as to make the ideal things real. Better not to profess any religion or name God at all, and yet to live and act as if this were a divine world, than merely to dream of the kingdom of heaven while doing nothing to bring it about. It is possible, on the other hand, to experience religion, that is, to know the satisfaction of the happy life, and not to know that it is religion. To trust, to hope for the best, to act for the best, to love and serve. These conditions, which sum up all religion and philosophy, constitute the happy life. It is here that the happy life, wrought out by each individual, becomes a contribution to the good of all. It has been supposed that the interest of the individual was different from the interest of society. The good man must sacrifice himself for the well-being of others. This may often still seem to be true. To do right will long appear to many to be a brave venture, but to him who sees, as God sees, the end and the beginning, The good of each is identical with the good of all. There is no conflict of interest. On the side of the mysteries and immensities of being, it is deep personal happiness to trust and to hope, like a son of God. But happiness like this is also contagious, and sweetens a whole neighborhood or community. On the side of our manifold human relations, it is equal happiness to love and to serve, as if indeed all men were children of God like ourselves. The happy life is the social life. The perfected individual makes the perfect society toward which we strive. These things suit our natures on every side. They urge us to perfect self-expression. In such self-expression of all there is in us, of our sense of beauty, of wisdom, of order, harmony, justice, love, humanity, there is growing joy, contentment, peace, satisfaction, worthy of God's sons. This is the eternal or universe life. As Whittier, the poet of liberty, sang, "Henceforth my heart shall sigh no more for olden time and holier shore. God's love and blessing then and there are now and here and everywhere." End of chapter 12, read by Max Cusimano. End of The Coming People by Charles F. Dole.